We all come from somewhere in the world. It's pretty well known that Canada's population is made up of a mix of people, all different ethnicities, all different cultural backgrounds. While America is known to be more of a melting pot, where all different cultures are assimilated into one, Canada is known as more of a mosaic, reflecting all the different cultures of everyone who comes here as one big culture. Some of that mosaic is even within my own family. During the 1950s, a few of my family members came here from different areas of Europe. My grandmother on my father's side came to Canada from Holland with her family when she was 10 years old, and my great-grandparents on my mother's side came here from post-war Italy a few months before my grandfather was born in the hopes of starting a better life. To tell the truth, I know a little bit more about their story. They came here knowing no English and with only one suitcase holding everything they brought with them. From stories I've heard, I know they worked really hard after coming to Canada. I never knew my great-grandfather, but in the present day, my great-grandmother is now 88 years old and is perfectly happy here in Canada with no wish to ever go back to Italy. She says Canada is now her home. On that note, Canada's culture has changed a lot over the decades, and most of it has been due to immigration trends, who moves to Canada from where and when and why they do. With that in mind, I started wondering, what have Canada's immigration trends been like over the years, and how have they affected Canada's culture? So I did some research, and here are some things I found. Immigration to Canada has been a thing since the settlers first came here. But back when Canada was first being settled, it was mostly people from France and the UK coming here. However, there were also a few immigrants from Germany, Ireland, Scotland, and Switzerland during the 18th century, as well as many American loyalists who came up to Canada from the United States during the American Revolution. In fact, a few of my own ancestors were loyalists who came up from the US. During the 19th century, there was not much change in who all was immigrating to Canada. It was still mostly English, Irish, Scottish, and American immigrants. In fact, it was the potato crop famine in Ireland in the 1840s that caused huge waves of Irish immigrants to come to Canada. Towards the end of the 19th century, the prairie provinces had a large intake of immigrants who were in high demand for wheat and farm goods. In the 1900s, 10s, and 20s, more people from more different countries started immigrating to Canada, and immigration rates were extremely high, but they dropped during the Great Depression and both World Wars. However, a lot of racism also tended to go along with immigration in the early to mid-20th century. The government had a condescending preference of ideal immigrants to Canada, with most European immigrants being near the top of the list, and people such as Jews, Asians, and black people being near the bottom of the list. During World War I, there was a lot of resistance against German and Asian immigrants, and groups of immigrants such as Italians, Polish, Jews, and Serbians were encouraged to fight in their home countries' armies. During World War II, there was also a lot of resistance against Asian, particularly Japanese, immigrants, as well as refusal to accept Jewish immigrants being persecuted by Hitler into Canada. After the Second World War, however, immigration policies were eventually changed so that there was no discrimination against any European immigrants. However, while immigration to Canada from countries like Italy, Greece, and Portugal swelled during the 1950s, Eastern European immigration dwindled with the start of the Cold War. In the 1960s, the last of the discriminating barriers for immigrants were brought down so that anyone could immigrate to Canada from anywhere, and in the early 1970s, more immigrants from outside of Europe started coming to Canada. This has continued to be the case every year ever since then. In the present day, anyone can immigrate to Canada from anywhere. And in the last 30 years, it's been mostly refugees coming to Canada, as well as mostly people from Asia and the Middle East. Canada is considered one of the most open countries to new citizens, receiving about several thousand immigrants and refugees every year. So, with that immigration history in mind, how have immigration trends affected Canada's diverse culture? Here are some examples. For one thing, Canada is a country populated with people of all different ethnicities and skin colors, and even skin colors. And in the present day, Canada is known for being so racially diverse. That wouldn't be the case if it wasn't for the immigration trends over the years. Another example can even be seen in job trends. Traditionally, immigrants have taken on a lot of jobs that current Canadian citizens aren't always as quick to take. These tend to be industrial or serving jobs, ones that are usually less glamorous than most white-collar jobs. Would these job trends be the way they are if it hadn't been for immigrants taking these jobs on over the years? Yet another example is all the aspects of Canadian culture that were originally part of other countries' cultures. Things like food, art, recreation, customs, and holidays are brought with immigrants and refugees who come to Canada, and if enough immigrants from a certain area are now carrying on these traditions in Canada, they can eventually become a big part of Canadian culture. Without certain groups of immigrants, some of these customs wouldn't even be a part of present day Canada's culture. These are just a few examples of how immigration has affected Canada, but there are many more. However, if one thinks about it, immigration really has had a massive effect on Canadian culture. After all, we all come from somewhere.